on the 5 House bills and um, 5 Senate bills and 1 House bill. Let me just reiterate. Senate Bill number 314, authored by Senator Zubiri. Senate Bill number 693, authored by Senator Revilla. Senate Bill number 897, authored by Senator Cayetano. Senate Bill 1018, authored by Senator Estrada, and Senate Bill number 1473, authored by Senator Villanueva. So there is quite a bit of support here in the Senate, considering that we have 5 Senate bills on the same topic. And then the House version, which was transmitted to us already, House Bill number 6558, is also part of the agenda today. So we'll call on the Committee Secretary to acknowledge our resource persons.
Morning, Your Honors. For today's public hearing, our second public hearing on the Real Property Valuation and Assessment Reform Act, we have the following resource persons. From the Bureau of Local Government and Finance, we have Ms. Maria Pamela P. Quizon. From the Bureau of Internal Revenue, Amadeo Samson and Attorney Brianna K. De Los Santos. From the National Economic and Development Authority, we have Undersecretary Crystal Lynn Tan Uy. From the National Tax and Research Center, we have Ms. Madonna Claire V. Aguilar. From the Department of Information and Communications Technology, we have Delia Basada and Director June Manuel Vincent Gaudan. From the PVDEC Industrial Authority, we have Attorney Shannon May Canoy and Mr. Ramonito Casino. From the City of Valenzuela, we have Attorney Ceciline R. Andrade, Mr. Jason Esternon, and Mr. Christian M. Pineda. From the Central Board of Assessment Appeals, we have Attorney Gualberto J. Oizon Jr. From the Tax Management Association of the Philippines, we have Attorney Crescencio T. Meneses. From the Action for Economic Reforms, we have Mr. Adolfo Jose Montesa. That will be all, Your Honor.
Thank you. Thank you, Comsec. So today, it's a continuation of the first public hearing. We have a lot of unanswered questions, and we need to also, we have a lot of clarificatory issues also that we want to put on record. This is a reform. So in any reform, there are pushbacks. And in any reform, there are a lot of issues that will arise. So it's good to discuss all of those issues, put them on record so that those who will be interested in reviewing what transpired and what was the discussion on this bill, they can do so by reading the transcript. So again, it's better to talk about the details now, no? So that people who will be interested reviewing, or some of the senators who will be interested in reviewing the law and reviewing the proposal, they can do so by reading the transcript. And we can cut a lot of time when we debate on this on the floor. So we'll start off again, no, with the DOF through the BLGF. No? EDPAM is here. EDPAM, I know, is very well versed with local government finance. In fact, we had an initial briefing on this, and it was quite clear what was the objective. But let's start from the beginning. I think it's good to again recap what is the intention of this proposal. And of course, let's address also EDPAM the issues surrounding it. Now, there are a lot of, this proposal can create a lot of misconceptions, no? And in effect, can also create a lot of fake news, no? And we don't want the fake news to overpower the benefits of this law, no? If this law will be twisted, a lot of people might raise howl in in approving this law. So it's very important that we cover all the issues and be transparent, no, in tackling all the issues. So we'll start from the beginning again, and we call on BLGF to brief us again on the directions of this bill, and let's discuss the issues as we go along.
Good morning and thank you, Honorable Chairperson Senator Win Gatchalian of the Committee on Ways and Means. We would like to begin by thanking the committee again for the opportunity to further discuss the proposed real property valuation and assessment reform. Along the way, this same presentation was presented by the body last week, but we'll go through it again. And in between, we will be highlighting some of the issues that were raised and pinpointing and clarifying those discussions. To begin, we'll have the presentation outline. We will have discussions on the overview of the real property tax. Let's go back to the main discussion point and the concept of real property tax so that we will fully understand the valuation procedure and the proposal and the reform that we're pushing. Then let's look into what's wrong with the current system and why are we needing the reform and what are the features of the reform. And last, Mr. Chairperson, we will be responding to the main concerns raised during the last week public hearing. Let's move on to the overview and the concept of real property. So we begin with a discussion on the literature that real property tax is a good tax. In fact, in other literature, you will find that real property tax is a perfect tax, being it's immobile, it's tangible, you cannot move it, and you cannot hide it. So it's a good tax. So the World Bank estimates that between 50% to 75% of the national wealth contained in real properties. The Peruvian economist De Soto even mentioned that 60% of the country's properties is dead capital amounting to 133 billion. At this point, Mr. Chairperson, I know that you asked last week what is dead capital. So let us at least define the dead capital mentioned in here by the Peruvian economist. So dead capital is an economic term related to property which is informally held. It's not legally recognized and cannot be exchanged for financial capital. So sayang po siya. Hindi po siya naisasama sa economy. So that's the definition here of the dead capital. So this lost forms of value are dead capital. In a number of countries, too many citizens cannot access this capital because their ownership rights are not adequately recorded. So that's the definition here of the dead capital. So way back 23 years ago, in 2000, we recognized, and even in the Interagency Coordinating Committee, there are already 3 reforms recognized and are recommended for key structural reforms. And what are these? First, let's address the local government political intervention and influence in the valuation process. There is also a discussion during last week, valuation and appraisal, but let's go to that later on. But we want to point out that what we are strengthening in this reform is the valuation process for the assessment of property taxes. What is the last 2 recommendation of that interagency coordinating committee is to adopt a single valuation base for taxation purposes. I want to emphasize the purpose, and that is taxation. No other reform is embodied in this proposed bills, but mainly for taxation purpose. And the third one is to establish a central appraisal authority. I think on the third one, we are agreeing that we are not adding up another layer of bureaucracy. We are not establishing another agency for that particular purpose. So we move on again to the importance of LGUs to be well-versed on real property tax. So as I mentioned earlier, land is one of the most important tangible assets of local government unit, and it is the main or primary source of revenues for many LGUs, particularly at the municipality level. In fact, when the local government code was passed 32 years ago, it real property tax has been versed and categorized as the lifeblood of the local government units. So real property tax is one of the most important revenue base of LGUs because it is based on value, which normally appreciate during periods of growth, urban expansion, or even inflation. This is stable tax. Again, we go back to the literature that it's a good tax and it's a perfect tax. Let's go to the basic guidelines in its imposition. And this particular enumeration that you're seeing on the slide are all provision under the local government code. We're just reviewing these basic guidelines. It shall be appraised at its current and fair market value. It shall be classified for assessment purposes on the basis of its actual use. It shall be assessed on the basis of uniform classification within each local government unit. Appraisal, assessment, levy, and collection of real property shall not be let to any private person, and appraisal and assessment of real property shall be equitable. We're just setting up the context in this particular slide. On the next slide, let's move on. What are the handles of the real property tax? So all of this, all the tax handles, there are three important characteristics. So all the tax handles are under the control and responsibility of the province and city, particularly of the Sanggunian. Why province and city? Because they're the one with the taxing power, and they're the LGU type that has the main that it can impose the real property tax. How about municipalities? They get a share. They don't impose it, but they get a share on real property tax. So what are these three handles? First is the approval of the schedule of market values, which is the basis for the taxation, and the determination of the assessment levels, tax rates, discounts, and penalties. Later on, we'll have a slide on what is assessment level and tax rate, because we have a unique setup here in the Philippines that it's not an outright multiplication of market value times the tax rate. We have what we call assessment level. So those are the three handles that will be in discussion for today's hearing. So it is a tax on the property and can be extinguished through payment. So it is an annual tax, accrues on the first day of January. So we need to pay a real property tax every January, but you can pay it through installment on a quarterly basis. So this next slide gives you an overview of how do we really compute real property tax. So this is the main computation. Again, going back to the three handles, you would note that real property tax is a factor of assessed value multiplying the tax rate. But even before you can go to the assessed value, you have to have a full knowledge of the unit value per square SMV times your area times the assessment level by class. So this is mainly the main RPT computation. Let's go back. What are those assessment levels we are talking about? And what is an assessment level? Assessment level is getting the percentage applied to the fair market value to determine the taxable value of the property, a taxable value. So we're not really taxing the whole market value, but getting a percentage or a portion only of that value. And that depends on the classification of your property. If it's residential, you look at the enumeration in here, it's under the local government code, residential 20%, agri 40, commercial 50. And you simply would look at that if the property is not an income earning property, you have a lower assessment level compared to those properties which are really earning. So also here in our country, it's not just the land, it's not just the building being taxed, but including the machineries. And we also have what we call special classes. Again, all of this assessment level provided under the local government code. Please note that the local government code sets the ceiling and not the floor. So the local code imposition, now we go to the tax rate. This is the second handle. is that basic real property tax is between 1% to 2% under the LGC. We also have what we call the Special Education Fund. This is a special levy wherein we piggyback a collection for education purposes. And this accrue, all of them, those collection under SEF accrue directly to the local school board. We also have other special levy, what we call idle land tax and socialized housing tax, also special levy if the project is being funded by the local government unit, but not all local government units use this particular imposition in their locality. So selected lang po ang meron ito. So this is an important slide wherein we're going to focus our discussion that we're not touching on the assessment level and the tax rate, but we're zeroing our discussion on the usapin of the market. How do we really go to that market value? So what is wrong with the current system? Because we're having the reform. So we enumerated in here 5 reasons. First is multiple valuation, so resulting in wide disparities in values. There are as many values as there are valuing agencies. Later on, we will give you the slides enumerating all these national government agencies. But again, we want to focus. Our main topic is strengthening valuation through taxation purposes, not touching on other purposes. And another reason what is wrong with the current system is we have outdated valuations used for governmental purposes, especially for national and local taxation. LGUs usually commingle valuation with that of taxation. We will later on, we will also give you that enumeration kung ilan ang outdated valuations for the LGUs and also that under the BIR. Outdated valuations result in costs for gone revenues, overvaluation when government pays, and also undervaluation when government tries to collect. Ang gusto po natin sa value ng property natin mababa kasi magbabayad tayo ng tax. Pero kung ibebenta natin yan, isasanla natin yan, we want that value to be higher. No single agency responsible for ensuring their valuation revaluations completed in accordance with internationally accepted standards, and an absence of the comprehensive real property electronic database to capture the transactions and support regular property revaluations, because assessors would really need reference and database wherein they can anchor their valuation. The next 4 or 5 slides are the enumeration of these 23 national government agencies. Yan. So we have these following agencies. We're putting this on record that we have these 23 national government agencies. But I have to go back on the first slide because we don't want to be lost here. That what we are, the second one, ayan po yung mga national government agencies, we're focusing only on the 3 in this enumeration. So we're focusing on the BIR because of the national taxation of property-related taxes, local government units because of the RPT, and the Bureau of Local Government Finance because of RPT administration. On the other national government agencies, they have different purposes. And with that different purposes, of course, they're using a different valuation standards on that. Okay. So we're enumerating everything in here. So for taxation, now we go back, because this is the meat of our discussion. For taxation, there are 2 sources of real property values. Even you can really, you know that even your own property, you get a different value from 2 sources. First is when you go into the BIR, the Bureau of Internal Revenue, there is such thing as the schedule of zonal values. But if you go to the local government units, which is the basis of your real property tax, we have the schedule of market value. And you can see in here, sino po yung outdated, sino po ang updated. We have 43% of zonal values and 79% of LGU SMVs are outdated. May I request the team to pull out? I know that one of the issues raised, sino-sino po ba yung mga outdated? So we have here the enumeration and the file of those outdated local government units. And this will be shared to everyone and also especially to the committee secretariat. So going back again, so we have 53 out of the 122 revenue district offices when we talk about zonal value did not revise their values in the last 3 years. And we also have 80 out of the 227. Why 227 only? Because again, we go back, it's only provinces and cities that can impose real property tax. And we have 81 provinces and 146 cities in our database in here. But we're taking note that we already have 82 provinces, Mr. Chairperson, and we have 147 cities as of the last count.
But Pam, before you continue, no, let me just on this topic of outdated LGUs, outdated SMBs. When you say outdated, they're outdated in terms of value, meaning market value versus market value versus what is in their SMBs, or outdated because they did not undergo assessment or what do you call that? Revision. Revision. These are two different things. No, you can revise, but you're still updated in terms of market value. No, so when you say outdated, what do you mean by that?
You are very much correct, Senator Win. So on the part of the BLGF, we reference our point of outdated based on the approval. So if the approval date is today, this year, we count off 3 years, then you are still updated based on approval. However, Senator Win, we are also taking note of LGUs with approved schedule of market values, but they defer their implementation. So again, we need to take note of that reference point.
So this one is just approved in terms of revising. Yeah. But it doesn't mean that their schedule of market value is what is the reality on the ground. What is the real market value? Because you can approve it, but your schedule of market value is still far off from the, in the absence of a term, from the transacted price.
You are again correct,
Okay,
Senator
but-
Win.
all right.
That is also a difference.
But you have a number that will compare. Okay, we'll
Yes.
discuss that later on. It's good to reflect that in the records. No, so it doesn't mean, I just want to point out, doesn't mean that you revise, that your revised schedule of market value is the actual transacted value or the actual existing market value. No, or, okay.
You are correct, Mr. Senator Win. So let's now go to the gap. So what's the difference and how the gap between the three reference values we are talking about here? Again, we started off with schedule of market value, also touching on schedule of zonal value, and also the prevailing market value based on the private valuation. So this is a picture on the average of that differences. if we compare schedule of market value versus that of the zonal values used by the BIR or being updated by the BIR, you're now seeing a disparity between 13% to 94%. Again, SMV versus zonal. If you compare schedule of market value with that of the a zonal value with that of the private valuation, we are still seeing a gap, and that is between 5 to 930%. But if you will now compare schedule of market value with that of the prevailing market value based on private valuation, you will really look into a very great, huge gap between 187 to more than 7,000% difference. Now let's go. This can be more visualized if we give examples, Senator Win. So let's now go through the next slide. This is an example that we have. If we go to Ayala Avenue in Mandaue City, the market value compared to the valuation by the assessor is almost 24 times. So in here, you will be seeing that Mandaue City last updated way back in 1996. And that particular area in Ayala Avenue, we have a schedule of market value of 40,000 per square meter. But comparing that with the BIR zonal value per square meter, where BIR updated way back in 2021, there's already a huge difference, 940,000 compared to 40,000. But if you'll be asking private valuers what is the true market value in that particular area, the numbers will jump off to 1 million per square meter. Another example that we have in this slide is also in Mandaue City in Dasmariñas Village. Again, 1996 schedule of market value, 13,500 per square meter. In the BIR database, we have 300,000 per square meter. But if you'll ask private valuers, the prevailing market value at the time is 400,000 per square meter. Let's go to Quezon City. In Quezon City, last revision was way back in 2017. In that particular area, we have 35,000 per square meter. And the zonal value is 190,000 already because BIR updated in 2020. But if you will ask private valuers, the market value prevailing at this time is already 200,000 per square meter, Mr. Chairperson. We added other examples in the next two slides. Yeah. So that one is Makati. We also have Muntinlupa City, Mr. Chairperson, now touching on commercial property. You'll see that in Muntinlupa City, their last revision of the schedule of market values way back in 2008, the zonal values from the BIR is 2019, and we gathered information of the actual market value in 2022. And you're now really seeing big gaps between the three values. On the next slide is another example in Mandaue City. In Mandaue City, ito po, bago talaga to, Senator Wen. 2022 po ang kanilang schedule of market value. The zonal is also 2022 po. But if you look at the true market value prevailing, also on the same reference period, you're also seeing a big gap. So those are the examples that we have, Mr. Chairperson, and the difference of the values.
On this topic, now earlier you mentioned that 79% of the SMVs are outdated, so meaning only 20% are outdated. This is on the part of the LGUs, no?
Correct.
But this is in relation to their revision, correct? But how many LGUs are updated or not updated in terms of actual versus SMVs? siguro 100% yan, I would assume. No? Guilty kami sa Valenzuela dyan, I think. So, di ba? Hindi yata tayo updated. No, but just for record purposes, no, I'm sure it's 100%, no. But just for record purposes, later on na lang, no, just submit to us how many LGUs. Maybe baka mayroong mga, you don't know, baka there are LGUs who are who have strong political will and they really updated their SMVs to the actual. No, maybe I don't know. If there are, just submit to us. No, just for record purposes.
We will, Senator Win. We will do that, Mr. Chairperson. But I guess you're correct on the 100%. If we will continue, now we're moving on. We're done with the comparison with the three values. Let's move on with the process. And this is the process that we have currently, and that can be vetted also by our colleagues at the BIR. So the LGU process is that assessor prepares the schedule of market values, submit to Sanggunian for approval and funding for general revision. So once approved by the Sanggunian, Mr. Chairperson, you know that we need to complete the cycle and we need to undertake general revision and updating of our records, updating of our tax declaration. That completes the picture on the part of the LGU. On the side of the BIR, there are committees, Mr. Chairperson, handling the process. It goes through technical committee, and then goes to the executive committee, wherein there would be public hearing and value determination supported by the assessors and private appraisers' information. So unlike the schedule of market value, zonal values are determined only for land, condominiums, townhouses ownership, generally higher than LGU valuations, as we have discussed earlier, but not compliant with professional standards because they still use and they get the two highest values and they do get the average. And that is not in accordance with internationally accepted standard, Mr. Chairperson. This is now the process. This process is what we are taking off in this proposal because we want to have one process wherein the national and local government units will have a single valuation base. Next. And this particular slide explains the difference. Why are we taking off and taking part of a very technical function, which is the valuation function, out of the political function? Again, we can go back to the tax handles of the real property tax. Political functions will remain to the local government unit, setting up the assessment level, the tax rate, and also, Mr. Chairperson, the decision on how much revenue and budget they would like to get on an annual basis. So those are decisions that's retained to the local government unit. The technical function now will be on updating the property values on for both the BIR and the LGUs in accordance with internationally accepted valuation standards. Mr. Chairperson, this was asked last week. Wherein can we really calibrate and cash on the increase? So we started off with the concept, and now we have an application. Medyo maliit ba? I hope you can see the numbers in here. So let us demonstrate. Okay. Alam, hindi makakita. Sorry. So we have here an example of a commercial property The current assessment level is 40%. The current tax rate is 2%. The land area is 2,000 per square meter. The current unit market value is 40,000. Remember the first example that we've shown earlier in Mandaue City? And the proposed unit market value is 940,000. So we have the current scenario in here. Okay. There are three scenarios that can be presented. You can calibrate assessment only, you can calibrate tax rate only, and you can do both, tax rate as well as the assessment level. So if we have this current data and the proposed data, if there's no tax impact study that will be done by at the LGU level, by combined in coordination with the assessor and with the local treasurer, let's look at the impact. If you're currently paying 640,000 without calibration and without the tax impact study, that particular taxpayer will now have a huge tax due amounting to 15 million. Let's look at the different scenario. The first one is calibrating the assessment level, making sure that the envisioned increase kaya pa po ni taxpayer. And in this one, we are calibrating an increase of 10%. Yeah. In case 10% increase in RPT due. So we calibrate assessment level, and the lowest assessment level wherein we can target that particular 10% increase is lower that to 1.8723% tax rate, assessment level. Area.
Para ma-compute.
Area. Land area, ma'am, is over there. It's 2,000. Can you please show the screen of the land area? It's 2,000.
2,000 times 40,000.
Yes. Yes. So that's scenario one. Let's go to the scenario two. If you will not touch assessment level and you will only touch tax rate, how low can the tax rate go? Then you can impose 0.0936%. If we do have a combination of the two, assessment level as well as the tax rate, then we will have these numbers wherein we can propose to the Sanggunian. That's 12.77% assessment level, putting it down from 40%, and a tax rate of 1.76%. All of this calibration will result to only a 10% increase in RPT. If you don't want to impose an increase, then we can still calibrate tax rate and assessment level. On the next three slides, we have three more examples. Also of the same illustration, wherein you can really cushion the increase and the impact if the market values will be increased. So we have illustration one over here, wherein we have, again, an assessment level of 40%, a tax rate of 2%, and a market value of 1 million. And this, if this 1 million market value will double, because the LGU did not revise for such a long time, and then the impact will also double if you will not calibrate the tax rate and the assessment level. But if you will calibrate it, you will see on the different scenario that you can lower the assessment level by half, 40% to 20%, and getting the same tax due of 8,000 pesos, or calibrate the assessment level, the tax rate from 2% to 1%, also getting the same tax due of 8,000, or the combination of the two. And two more illustrations on the next two more slides for reference and information of the Let's move on to an actual experience in Mandaue City. So Mandaue City, we have, since local government code po, they revised in 2015. So their last market value, schedule of market value, is in 1993. This is the old, and they revised in 2015. This is the new, and you can readily see the huge increases because the LGU did not revise for such a long time. Okay. And you'll also look at the assessment level. So I hope you can zoom in na lang po, baka hindi nila makita. Assessment level, we have the old assessment level of Mandaue City in 1993. And you can see their approved, revised assessment level from 20 to 1%, 50 to 3% for commercial, 50 to 3% for industrial, and 40 to 15% for agricultural. And how about the tax due? So we also took samples out of that Mandaue City experience. We have residential. You're paying 182 pesos in 1993 because that's the prevailing market value and that's the base of the real property tax. When they did revise it, calibrating the increase, if Mandaue did not calibrate it and use still the 1993 assessment level and RPT rate, that residential taxpayer will be paying 4,160. But because of the calibration and adjustment, they're now paying 208. And we also have examples for commercial, for industrial, and also for rice land. So these are actual samples we gathered from Mandaue City experience. How about the performance of Mandaue City? So let's look at the next slide. So when they did revise in 2015, the increase on the following year is 10%. You will be seeing increases, a very notable increase in 2018 at 42%, because Mandaue City also, together with the revision of the schedule of market value, also applied strategies on how to effectively collect the real property tax. So you're seeing increases. And now, if you look at when they did revise in 2015, so their first collection is in 2016, that collection now almost doubled if you compare it in 2022. So we go back to the discussion of our proposal. So what are the main features of RPVAR? So we would like to propose to get away with multiple valuation bases and have a single valuation base for taxation purposes. Again, we want to emphasize taxation purposes and only benchmarking or reference values for other purposes. We want to get away with outdated values because with RPVAR, we will have regular updating and taking away the valuation function, and also setting up a comprehensive electronic database because now we will have a reliable and transparent valuation reference values because of this database. So the key difference, we have earlier a slide of the current process because currently we have two methodologies and approval done. We're taking that out. And this time, what we are proposing is a valuation that is based on internationally accepted valuation standards. Mr. Chair, on the next slide is the proposal, together with the bill, the process on how we will do and approve the schedule of market value. So if you look at the slide, let's zero in on the valuation process first. This is on the right side of your screen. Do note that the assessors play a very critical role in this process because they're the one who will going to prepare the schedule of market value and then submit this to the BLGF regional office if the LGU is outside Metro Manila. But if it's in the National Capital Region, they submit it directly to the central office. Then we conduct at least one public consultation on the proposed schedule of market value, and this will be endorsed to the BLGF Executive Director and the Commissioner of Internal Revenue. Why together with the BIR? Because again, take note that BIR collects the national tax imposition related to property taxes. So BLGF, together with the BIR, recommends and endorses the proposed schedule of market value to the Secretary of Finance. So once approved, we will ensure that we will publish the approved schedule of market values in the official gazette, post this in the official website of the DOF and concerned LGUs. And since we now DOF sends the approved schedule of market value to the BLGF, and BLGF sends this approved schedule of market value to the concerned assessor. Once the LGU now gets the schedule of market value, we now look at the process on the other side of the screen. So together with that schedule of market value approved by the Secretary of Finance, you will be needing it. The LGUs will be needing it. As shown earlier in our examples, they need now to set the assessment level and tax rate process. And this is through the tax impact study. The assessor, in coordination with the treasurer, estimates and submits the revenue and tax impact report with the approved schedule of market value to the local chief executive. Then the local chief executive transmits this report to the Sanggunian for the enactment of an ordinance. Then Sanggunian enacts this ordinance for the revision of property assessment level and tax rate, and the LC approves the ordinance for the assessment levels and tax rates and publishes this approved ordinance. After this approval, again, we need to complete the picture because the LGU will still have to undergo the general revision of property assessments and classifications, and they also need to send new assessments to us, taxpayers, because we need to pay also our amilyar, baka po bago na kasi ang tax due natin. So, Mr. Chairperson, this is now the process that we are proposing under the RPVAR. So, what are we ensuring with RPVAR? So, we add RPVAR, we are again creating an electronic database for the use of reference as reference point and reference values of the assessors because they will be needing it. There will be a formation of central and regional consultative committees in case there will be issues on valuation. So that's the platform and venue of these stakeholders. We also have provisions for penalty. And Mr. Chairperson, because we need a body wherein taxpayers would go to, taxpayers' remedy to appeal, we need to really have an active local board of assessment appeals. Because on our last survey, we took note that only 30% in the country, around that average, has an active local board and assessment appeals. So where will the taxpayer go in case they will have to question that appeal? So in this proposal, we will ensure that all LBAs are active and functioning, of course. We go to response. So, Mr. Chairperson, please allow us to now go to the response of the issues raised. So, this is one concern that we culled from the transcript of the last public hearing, which we are also responding to, Mr. Chairperson. First is the updating the schedule of market values will result in a proportionate increase in real property taxes. Yes, as shown earlier, it will. But take note that the SMV is one variable again. So we can cushion it by adjusting the assessment level and tax rate I've shown and demonstrated earlier. And we also took note of the basis of this response. The second concern, Mr. Chairperson, is that RPVAR is unconstitutional as it infringes on local government autonomy. So as main ground to support the constitutionality of RPVAR, we are suggesting to the body and to the committee for consideration the argument that local autonomy under the Constitution is subject to limitations based on national interests. That pertinent provision of the 1987 Constitution on Fiscal Autonomy expressly provide that this subject to limitations that Congress may provide. And we have called in that particular provision on the Constitution, flash on your screen. We also took a jurisprudence in the case of Pimentel versus Aguirre. The Supreme Court held that LGUs are still agents of the national government, where the latter retains the power to set national policies that may affect local areas. So as follows, as quoted in that particular jurisprudence, now autonomy is either decentralization of administration or decentralization of power. There is decentralization of administration when the central government delegates administrative powers to political subdivisions in order to broaden the base of government power and in the process to make local governments more responsive and accountable and ensure their fullest development as self-reliant communities and make them more effective partners in the pursuit of national development and social progress. So at the same time, it relieves the central government of the burden of managing local affairs and enables it to concentrate on national concerns. The President exercises general supervision over them, but only to ensure that local affairs are administered according to law. He has no control over their acts in the sense that he can substitute their judgment with his own. Decentralization of power, on the other hand, involves an abdication of political power in the favor of local government units declared to be autonomous. In that case, the autonomous government is free to chart its own destiny and shape its future with minimum intervention from central authorities. So, according to a constitutional author, decentralization of power amounts to self immolation, since in that event, the autonomous government becomes accountable not to the central authorities but to its constituency. So we have here the full context, Mr. Chairperson, of our suggestion and recommendation to the body on how to answer the concern on RPVAR being unconstitutional. And it also continues on the next slide, Mr. Chairperson. How about the question on data privacy? This is also a case that was raised during the last public hearing. So, RPVAR, because we need to establish a legitimate purpose on why we are collecting those information. And in RPVAR, we set a legitimate purpose. So RPVAR establishes a legitimate purpose for the processing of information relating to real property transactions. So going back to the objectives of RPVAR is to establish, maintain standards, adopt market value, single base valuation, and the provision to come up with a comprehensive and up-to-date electronic database of all real property transactions. So the sharing of information is necessary to carry out the purpose of RPVAR to establish a real property valuation database. If enacted as a law, the processing becomes a legitimate purpose as mandated and required to carry out an authority granted by Congress. So the sharing of information is also necessary for the use of market value as the single valuation standard. The RPVAR shall ensure the transparency and proportionality of the processing of the necessary information. We also like to highlight, Mr. Chairperson, that in the inputting or populating the real property database, it will not be lodged as the responsibility, additional responsibility of the assessor. It will be directly submitted to the system where the information will be sourced. Let's also answer the question, what will be the impact of RPVAR? Will it be inflationary? So during the last Congress, Representative Joey Salceda already instructed Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas to undergo a study for the impact of RPVAR. In that study results, the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas estimates that RPVAR will have a minimal effect on inflation of an additional 0.03%. So, Mr. Chairperson, we will also submit the study conducted by the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas. Mr. Chairperson, allow us to give you the final message of our presentation. So the key benefits is to enhance technical cooperation between the national and local governments. Of course, we want to ensure efficient rollout of infrastructure projects due to minimize valuation disputes. And at the end of the day, everyone here participating in this dialogue, we know that we want to improve investors' confidence and public trust in government's valuation, Mr. Chairperson. Thank you again, Mr. Chairperson, for the opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Pam, for that very clear and methodical presentation. If that was done during the first hearing, I don't think we'll have the second hearing anymore. No, but it's important to lay down the groundwork. No? Like I said, there's so many misconceptions about this bill. Even our own senators, some of the senators will have misconceptions, and we want to allay those fears and those misconceptions by laying down the premise and data, very clearly and through the transcripts. That's why it's important that we discuss all the issues, and those who are watching, those who are following this, especially real estate people, local government units, taxpayers themselves, no? They will have a lot of misconceptions about this bill. No? And I always say that while I support the revenue collection of government, but it's important also to balance the interest of our taxpayers, no? Considering that our taxpayers also experience a lot of challenges, especially after the pandemic. So with that, I'll go on to some questions, no, and these are some of this you've already tackled it through your presentation. I think the constitutionality issue was well explained, no? And in my opinion, the long and short answer of it, and maybe we can ask Yusek Crystal Uy, who's a bar top notcher, no, she can share her opinion on this. The simple answer is the Constitution empowered Congress to set up guidelines and limitations on tax collecting. No? So it's not a blanket authority that the Constitution gave Congress, or sorry, gave the local government. No, in fact, the local government code is created by Congress. So and if you look at the local government code, there's so many limitations, no? And so many formulas. One of which is the schedule of market values, the assessed value, even the tax rates. No, so in other words, Congress can remove all of those. Congress can rearrange the formula. Congress can increase increase the threshold, reduce the limitations. So, in other words, Congress was empowered, no, to come up with all of those guidelines and limitations. So, in other words, in my opinion, there is no constitutional infirmity. No, I just want to throw that out so that it's put on record, and everyone who will be reading the transcript will appreciate that. So that's number one. No? And then the other question that I posed last time is the local nuance. No? I think I don't know if you were appraised on this question, but if you look at the local government code, the revision and the schedule of market values was given to the local sanggunian to approve. No, in fact, diba, there are three in your presentation. Let's show this nga in the slide. There are three segments. The technical, here, the valuation, the assessment level. Can we show that slide 30? No? Okay. Or this one. No? All of this function now is political in nature, correct? Even the quote unquote technical functions political in nature. But there's a reason for that. And in my opinion, the reason for that is the political aspect takes into consideration the local nuances. No? So in other words, if a politician is not sensitive to the local nuance, hindi siya mananalo. If the politician will be deaf and blind to what the people feel and what the people encounter, that local politician will not win. No? So I think the wisdom of, sayang wala si Senator Pimentel, no? But the wisdom, I was going to consult with him, but the wisdom behind putting the valuation as part of the political process is to make the politicians responsive to the local nuances. No? For example, I cited nga last time Valenzuela. In our last revision, we didn't touch residential, no? Because that's the clamor of our local residents, no? Because they were saying that residences are not income earning, they don't derive anything from their homes, di ba? So it's unjustifiable to impose higher taxes on them or increase their market values. So my example is a example of taking into consideration the local nuances. And that became the political process. No? So that's the, in my opinion, that is the spirit why the framers of the LGC included the valuation as part of the political process. But we're now taking that out. Pam, no? We're taking out, even though you call it a political process, but that political process is what makes the politicians sensitive and responsive to the needs of our constituents. You take that out, the local politicians, wala na siyang pakialam. No? So, but that's why I threw that question last time is, how will we ensure that the local politicians will still be responsive to the local nuances? For example, in parts of Bulacan, Hagonoy, Kalumpit, binabaha dyan, no? And I am very sure they haven't that the province haven't increased their schedule of market values in that area, precisely because they take into consideration what the local residents feel and experience in that area, or else they will lose if they raise the market value. So now we're taking that out. So how can we be assured that the local politicians will still remain responsive to the local nuances? Will still listen, will still conduct regular consultations to their constituents. No? So that's the question I want to throw to BLGF once again. How do we assure the public that taking one of the segments, out of the power of the local Sanggunian, how do we still assure the public that the local Sanggunian will remain responsive? Yusek Shelo.
Thank you, Senator Win. Actually, tama po kayo. The essence of decentralization and local autonomy is to make local governments more responsive to the needs of the citizen. I think in the current proposal, hindi po yun nawawala because the power to set the tax rate and the assessment level still lies on the decision of our local sanggunian. In fact, our proposal will actually enhance self-reliance and coordinated development with respect to social, political, economic. Why? Because the valuation of properties will now be determined by the market. As your example po, in Bulacan, if the price is determined by the market and if a street is always flooded, then the willingness to pay of people with respect to that land will not be as high as the other area where other areas that will not be experienced flooding. So if we have market valuation as a reference for local sanggunian, it will actually give them a proxy indicator in terms of the extent of development at the local level. So halimbawa po local sanggunian, makikita natin bakit dito sa lugar nito ang baba ng valuation ng property, bakit dito mataas. And that will help local governments direct infrastructure, social, economic interventions to enhance the quality of life in that area. And not only within local governments, because what we're setting is a national standard in terms of valuation. Now local governments can compare each other in terms of performance. Why is this local government more attractive with respect to investment, property, and property can be a proxy for that compared to other local government units. And I think that will help in terms of giving local governments information in terms of the extent of and how competitive they are with respect to other LGUs. So two elements. One is we are not removing the power of the LGU to be more responsive to the needs of their constituencies. That is through the assessment level and the tax rate. Number two, we are in fact enhancing them by giving them additional information so that they can reference the extent of the development at the local level and in comparison with other local units.
In other words, with the assessment level and tax rate still within the powers of the local sanggunian, they can remain responsive to whatever, no, whatever's happening locally, no. That was demonstrated earlier, no, that even though we take out valuation, the power of valuation from the local sanggunian can actually make the tax due remain the same, no? Or even lower, correct? I think there was a demonstration earlier that they can actually lower down the tax rates and lower down the tax due. Tama yun, no? Okay. And you also demonstrated that there's actually an LGU who's doing that right now, Mandaue, correct? So they lowered down their assessment level to as low as 5%. So can we flash that? Ano? Tama. In Mandaue, can we flash that? So here, Pam, the assessment level from as high as 40%, no? Or the old one is as high as 50% for commercial industrial. It went down to 3%, correct? So in the same vein, LGUs can lower down their assessment level. So in other words, the assessment level is from zero, or not zero, no, point zero zero one, no, to 40%, 50%, or 20%. Correct? That is the range that the LGUs can play around with in order to dictate what tax due they want. All right. So let's put that on record because it's important to emphasize that it's really up to the LGU to dictate what tax due do they want. They want higher, they want lower, no? And they can use the two determinants, no? The assessed level and also the tax rate. All right. Okay. You might want to use the mic so you can.
That's very correct, sir. We want to put on record that on the Mandaue experience, residential from old assessment level of 20%, it agricultural from 40% to 15%. You're correct, Mr. Chairperson, that the LGU will be setting the assessment level and also the tax rate.
All right. We go on to the power of the DOF secretary because this is a new feature here, no? And in the process, actually, I asked this last time, but I'll ask it again. No? From what I understand in the process, the DOF secretary will have the power to determine what is the right schedule of market value. Tama po ba? Is that the direction? Yeah, here.
Yes, sir. It's for the approval, sir, of the Secretary of Finance, but the proposal would still come from the local assessors.
Can the DOF secretary override the local assessor and override public consultation? Can, for example, for example lang, for example, the DOF secretary finds the SMV low, can he can he increase it?
The idea, sir, is once we have this system, our BLGF will define methodology in terms of setting the market standard, and then that methodology will be adopted or implemented by the assessor. So when the Department of Finance reviews the submission of the assessor, it will be based on the adoption of the methodology or the process. So if there are inconsistencies in terms of the methodology and the process, revisions to the SMBB will be based on that. So the assumption is that if we are to apply the methodology, we are supposed to arrive to a market value ng local properties.
Yeah, but the secretary will look at the process or will look at the value, because there are instances wherein as if you follow the process, regardless of the value, you're already approved. No? But is it being contemplated that the DOF secretary will also look at the value itself? No? For example, he doesn't agree with the value. He thinks it should be higher or should be lower. Can he change the value?
The power of the Secretary of Finance does not involve determination, sir. He cannot override, nor modify, or alter. In case there will be questions, it will revolve around, did the one who determined it, did they apply the accepted valuation standard? And then that particular, if there will be question, then the Secretary of Finance will have to return it, but will not modify and alter it, Mr. Chairperson.
Okay, so the power is only to determine whether they follow the process. No, if the assessor did not follow the process, it will be returned, and they will start from scratch. No? I would assume BLGF will come up with circulars for them to follow. Correct. So that's it. We have to be very clear that the secretary will not impose higher or lower values, no? Because that's a different process. Looking at the process, looking at the value is different decision-making points. No? So let's be clear that the secretary is just going to look at the process.
Yes, sir, but there are two processes. One would be the political process where consultations will have to be conducted, and the second process is the methodology in terms of determining the market value, which is a global standard.
Correct. Yeah. Okay, so that's very clear. We just need to reflect that in the law, because my understanding is the DOF secretary, because it can approve or disapprove. So my interpretation there goes without saying that he can also change, no? Alter the schedule of market values. Okay, so that's clear. On the assessor, I can see here that the assessor, sayang wala tayong association, no? Ikaw na muna mag-represent, Celine. She's an officer naman, no? Yeah, but the assessor here in this process, no, this is a very clear process. This was not shown last time. The assessor is given a lot of responsibility, no, to determine the SMV. No, in fact, that's step one. No? So if you have a well-trained assessor, well and good. But if you have an assessor who's not responsive, then that's to the detriment of the LGU. And then you go to a public consultation. No? So that's the process. And then you go to the DOF secretary. In the present scheme of things, in the present process, the public consultation is the hearing. Correct? The public hearing. And the public hearing becomes binding. Diba? So what happened? The step one now is the same. Diba? Celine, they have a valuation, they have a revision process, and they submit it to the Sanggunian, and then the Sanggunian conducts a hearing, a public hearing. That public hearing / consultation is already binding. Whatever the Sanggunian approves, that's it. No? And the Sanggunian can increase it, can decrease it, depending on the public hearing, depending what the Sanggunian hears from our constituents. So in this particular case, the public consultation comes before the Sanggunian. No? And the Sanggunian will now just adopt whatever the secretary endorses to the Sanggunian. No? So, in other words, the Sanggunian loses that public consultation power or process through the determination of the schedule of market value. And instead, it gives that power to the assessor. No? So, my question is, aren't we giving the assessor a lot of power, no, to determine? No? Of course, the answer to that is they will follow international standards, they will follow process. Nevertheless, the assessor, the loan figure, for example, in Valenzuela City, the loan figure, the loan person will now have the power to determine what rates to set up and down. No? And the public consultation tinanggal natin yun because it's not part of the Sanggunian anymore. The public consultation here, I think it's just more for for compliance purposes. So aren't we giving the assessor too much power to determine what rates a locality will have?
We recognize, Mr. Chair, that we are giving a significant power and accountability also to the local assessor. But the assumption is that in this process, we'll also be building a database where the local assessor should refer to, kasi that the database should reflect market transactions. Because the idea is that the determination of the valuation should not be political anymore, but is determined by the market. So the assessor is expected to refer to market data in terms of setting the valuation for a specific locality.
But without that public hearing, kasi if you look at this timetable, the LCE transmitted to Sanggunian for enactment, the Sanggunian enacts an ordinance, parang nawala na si public hearing dyan Si Sanggunian became a parang ano na lang siya here ministerial no? So ngayon kasi the check and balance there is the Sanggunian checks on the assessor. And the assessor is answerable to the Sanggunian. But in this particular case, in fact, during the hearing, pinapatawag ka, di ba, Celine? Oh, Celine is, but now, tanggal na siya Because if the Sanggunian became a ministerial body already, because nawala na nga yung public consultation. So go ahead, Celine. My point there is, I just feel that the assessor is given so much power to determine.
Actually, sir,
Nawala yung check and balance.
Sir, MV preparation it is. Kung titingnan niyo, sir, yung data na kinuha nila from Makati, data from brokers ba yun? Valuers yon. Sir, kung tutuusin, hindi yun ang sales data na makukuha ni assessors. Usually, ng sales data na makukuha ni assessors, halos peg nun is the zonal value more or less. So kung makikita niyo yung discrepancy nun, ang laki po nun, 100% to 1,200% kung tutusin if they don't revise since 1994. Kung nakita naman po sa process, there is the first consultation on the part of the BLGF before they review. They have a consultation of the schedule of market value that they will consider as part of the review and recommendation with the secretary. And then sa side naman po ng LGU, there's still a consultation because the assessor is will give the option 3 tax impact study that will propose the increase or decrease or possible maintenance of the tax due of the taxpayers. May consultation yon, then may public hearing yon, and may 3 publications din, sir.
Trying to operationalize this So the assessor will prepare the
Schedule.
SMV, you'll do a consultation.
They will do
Sasabihin-
a consultation.
Hindi ba ang BLGF and the LGU?
BLGF na po doon. Kasi sila nasa kanila na yung power to
Oh, that's also another thing. No? Who does the consultation?
Together with BIR, BLGF, and LGU.
Who goes down to the LGU and say, oh, agree ba kayo dito na itong kalsada nyo, 5,000 per square meter?
Actually, yun yung ginagawa ng BIR pagka nagre-revise. Sabay-sabay po talaga.
So some people will say, no, masyadong mataas
Yes.
yan. So when they say masyadong mataas yan, wala na silang power to lower it down. The only recourse is for them to go to the Sanggunian. Diba? But in this case, naging ministerial na lang si Sanggunian. That's my point. I'm trying to operationalize this. Right now, kasi the public has that voice when they go to the Sanggunian. I don't agree with that 5,000. Lagawin nyo 2,000. And then they will lower it down. No? But right now, that power is gone already. No? So, and then that power is transferred to the assessor. But you'll do a public consultation. But then again nga, when it goes to the Sanggunian, wala na yun. So my point there is, I have 2 points. No? Number one, we're vesting a lot of power to the assessor. No? And then number 2, what is the recourse of the ordinary homeowner who who does not agree with the market value, anong pwede niyang gawin, no?
Yes, Mr. Chair. So I think the first one with respect to the recourse of the residents in terms of the proper valuation of their property is still the public consultation that BLGF, BIR, and the local assessor would conduct. Second, I think it's also I think the what happened is that in practice, residents would tend to focus on the valuation of their property to lower their tax liability. But this time it will shift because now the valuation of your property will in fact give you a correct indicator on how your asset is growing. So if I'm a resident and my properties, the value of my property is so much lower than the other properties in my LGU, in fact, I should use this as an indicator to complain to my LGU because that means there's something wrong with my area kung bakit bumababa yung property. And that would also shift the local dynamic in terms of looking at my tax liability. I won't look anymore at the value of my property, but look at the assessment level and the tax rate as an indicator on my tax liability, and therefore would lobby my local council on the rates that they should impose based on my property valuation. So magkakaroon po ng shifting in terms of appreciating the numbers at the local level.
I think that will be the offshoot of this process. But I think we should educate our taxpayers and residents, no? Because the focus now is really the schedule of market value. I know that for a fact. Kasi when I go down, alam ni Celine yan, when you go down, they always focus on the market value. They don't look at the tax rates. No? Because the market value is easy to understand. No? It's 5,000 per square, 100,000 per square. So I think that's where the information drive should come in, no? Because everyone is fixated now with the market values. No? But I agree. No? The new dimension or the new focus should be on the assessed and the tax rates. No? And I think that should be cascaded down the LGUs. No? All right. Yeah, that's clear. Okay. There's another, I raised this during the briefing. Some LGUs are quite efficient in terms of collecting. Not naman to, again, to focus on Valenzuela, but we put a lot of effort in efficiency than increasing tax. No? And evidence will bear that if you use technology, for example, you link up your assessor to your treasury, you use geographic information system, alam niyo yun, Celine, no? You can boost your collection by almost double. No? And some LGUs will opt to do that, no? Focus on efficiency rather than revise your code. No? Because it's less political and it's more efficient. No? So my question there is, how are we, number one, how are we incentivizing those who are efficient? Those who strive to be efficient, to really work to automate their system, implement geographic. Alam niyo yung GIS, di ba, Pam? You've seen how Valenzuela does it, no? So you implement geographical information system, and in the same manner, how do you penalize those who are not efficient? Baka they're just waiting, let's just revise. Bahala na wag na tayo mag-automate. No, let's just revise. That's the easy way out. So incentives and carrots and sticks. Now, how do you incentivize efficiency? How do you penalize those who are not efficient?
Sir, the DOF, Mr. Chairperson, the DOF is a member of the Seal of Good Local Governance under one component that is financial administration. For the last 3 years, we have been proposing that if the LGU will revise their schedule of market value, be it one of the criteria in the financial administration scope. However, because there are a lot, kokonti lang po kasi yung efficient na mag-revise. There are a lot of LGUs that were outdated. So it was always taken out of that criteria. But yes, Mr. Chairperson, we are regularly proposing that as a incentivized mechanism, tool for the LGUs who are regularly updating. So that's through the SGLG. On the penal one, under the RP-VAR bills, Mr. Chairperson, there are penal provisions for entities or LGUs who will not which will not revise their schedule of market values. There are penal provisions.
Do you have numbers on how many LGUs are automated? Do we have that number?
Mr. Chairperson, we have already.
When I say automated,
We will.
from assessment all the way to treasury. Do we have that?
We-
Actually, dapat all the way to settlement nga eh. No?
We have a survey on that, Mr. Chairperson.
But let's run not only a survey, but let's count everyone.
Yes, sir.
If you have that, just goes to show, because my point here, to USEC and to EDPAM is, let's use this law as an opportunity to automate.
Correct.
I think the direction of the administration is digitalization. I think this law is a good opportunity to digitalize, automate our LGUs, and there are a lot of good LGUs na,
Yes.
na automated, no? But that's their own their own initiative. Eh. So there, sige.
Mr. Chairperson, it's flash on your screen. So as of May 20, 2019, we will be updating this instrument that we have. So 88, tama ba? 68%, 729 with existing real property assessment related system, and 32% with no system, mostly in the 5th and 6th class municipalities, Mr. Chairperson. We would also like to put on record that we have a local governance reform project right now under the Asian Development Bank, wherein we will be providing technical assistance to the LGUs on computerization, Mr. Chairperson, including computer-aided mass appraisal with geographical information system or GIS.
Proposal to, and we can work on this together, is to already incorporate in the law incentives, penalties, and even support to LGUs who want to automate. No, this is not only benefit to the LGUs but also to the taxpayers. No, we've seen that with our experience. Eh. If you automate it all the way to settlement, meaning how they pay, you'll see increase in collection without even touching the tax rates. No, so I think it's a good opportunity through this law to already push LGUs, incentivize and push LGUs to automate.
Mr. Chair, may I be recognized, sir?
Yes, go ahead. Yeah.
Sir, Director Godan from the Department of Information and Communications Technology. Sir, we are very supportive of any digital transformation being initiated by DOF, BLGF, and all the local government units. Gusto ko lang po sana ma-share sa body that the ICT has this project we call ELGU, and this ELGU will also cover the real property tax also. So basically, all the payments can be done in that single app. It's a citizen-centric application that citizens can download, and all the payments that need to be paid to the local governments will also be there. So first and foremost, we are very happy that there is an initiative like this. And we would want to make sure that there is an end-to-end process po. The ICT would like to see that if we automate, it's not piecemeal automation also. It's an entire end-to-end because as what the good senator said, it would be nice that even po pagpunta sa payment naman na area po, si DICT nag-launch po ng ELGU last year, Mr. Chairman. Kasama po natin dyan, mga 500 LGUs, and they are being implemented right now. This ELGU is actually an improvement from the IBPLS. Kasi yung dati IBPLS lang po yung tinitingnan natin. Ngayon meron na pong NBI clearance, meron na pong PNP clearance, nandito na po din si BLGF for the real property tax. So, Mr. Chair, in due time, we would like to submit our official position paper to this humble August body for your consideration, Mr. Chair. Most especially dun sa creation of a database. We acknowledge that that database is very vital. That is a critical infrastructure in the Philippines. That's one of the vital information that we will. So DICT is there to secure it. And in the proper time, Mr. Chair, we will submit our inclusions, Mr. Chairs, and any amendments of the particular law that we are discussing right now. But we are very, very committed to help, Mr. Chair.
Director Gaudan, do you have any program or any software that you give out to LGUs? I know for a fact that a lot of even municipality, ang common feedback ko with small cities and municipalities is too expensive for them. That's a common feedback, because it can range from a low of a few millions to a high of 50, 60 million. No? So a lot of the LGUs, especially the smaller ones, do not automate, do not digitalize. So, but we all know that the process inside LGU, dekohon na yan eh. What Valenzuela, what an LUC is doing, what an HUC is doing, is the same with the municipalities, the same with small cities. No, dekohon na siya. So is there any program, software that the ICT is giving away, or financing so that LGUs can make it, so that LGUs, it's affordable for them to transition into automation? Because we can probably incorporate that in the law. No? My point there is, let's just use this as an opportunity to digitalize. And ginagawa na rin naman natin to eh. No?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Thank you for that very an opportune time din, Mr. Chair, to share to you the ELGU application, which is a citizen-centric app, is to be afforded for free to everyone, for every citizens. Tapos dun po sa back-end natin, merong mga common systems like yung mga LGUs natin, kasi napansin po namin, the Government Digital Transformation Bureau is the one also approving the ISSPs. Nakikita po natin, Mr. Chair, na ang dami-daming mga common systems. Common lang naman siya, pero umaabot sa bilyon yung ginagastos ng gobyerno to fund and develop that particular system. So what we have now with the new administration, kay Sec Ivan, ang instruction lang naman niya sa amin is that we will have all the common systems developed in the ICT. And we have in line an end-to-end application, Mr. Chair, for all the LGU-related documents, requisition, and anything that needs payment. So, ayun po, that's part of our recommendation, Mr. Chair, that we will give this out also to LGUs for free because we can develop it and we can do it, Mr. Chair.
Lagay namin sa batas yan, ha? Kayo siguraduhin nyo, makadistribute kayo for free, ha? Ilalagay namin ni Yusek Shelo yan dito. I'll move to, I have some more questions for DOF and BLGF, but I'll move to the other resource persons because I asked this last time from NEDA regarding benchmarks, no? And I just want to know because unlike tax collecting, there's a tax collecting per GDP. Diba? We're hovering around 12, 13%. So we can actually compare ourselves to international figures. But for RPT, I understand from our briefers, the RPT is collected in different manner in different jurisdictions. No? But I just want to understand, where are we when it comes to RPT collection? Are we at least naman at par with our peers? Are we below? Are we high? So at least we have a target that we can work on.
Thank you, Senator. For the taxes on immovable property, which covers land and building, the Philippines, so what we have is comparator countries as a percentage of GDP. So the Philippines is at an average of from 2016 to 2020 of 0.4. And if you compare that with Argentina is at 0.5, Brazil at 0.6, Cambodia 0.1, Indonesia 0.1, Laos 0.1, Paraguay and Peru 0.2, Singapore is at 0.9, Thailand is at 0.2, Vietnam is at 0.03. And if you look at the Asia Pacific average is it's actually 0.5. But if you look at the OECD average, it's at 1.0. And other high-performing countries like France and United Kingdom, the property tax revenues could reach up to 4% of the GDP. So that is the benchmarking that we were able to
So
provide.
what should our country be in? I think obviously if it's high developed nation, that's already quite high, no? 4% of GDP. You mentioned earlier that Asia Pacific is 0.5
Yes, 0.5.
and we're already 0.4.
Yes, that is
Does
correct.
that mean that we're already efficient? We're only 0.1 shy away from the Asia Pacific average.
Well,
What should be, my point is, what should be our target so we can, kasi once we revise this, I know that BIR is being measured on tax per GDP, no? 12, 13% right now. So this is purely a local government driven collection. So in other words, we have to also give the local government some measure, no, some target that they should reach as a whole collectively. So what's the recommendation of NEDA in terms of RPT?
so if we look at the literature, we don't really see a recommended average. It's only but the usual theme of the findings is that the region for Asia Pacific, it's very low um, as a percentage to GDP. So although we are at 0.4 and the average is 0.5, the literature does not show that 0.5 is actually something to aspire to. So we need to move more towards in line with other high performing economies. So I note that, for example, for Singapore, Singapore is actually 0.9.
So I guess you mentioned earlier OECD is 1%, correct?
The average for OECD,
For
because it's a composition of different economies.
Correct.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
So I guess 1% is something to strive for. No, I think with all this, it's easy to double. I think in the medium term, because the economy is growing. So, how about other measure? Is there any other aside from real property tax to GDP? Are there other measure that we can use to determine whether the law is effective or not? What I'm driving at is we also need to measure the law itself, no? Whether the law is efficient or not. No? That's why I'm also looking at efficiency, not only tax rates. No?
Um, we can actually another one idea. So we don't see any other benchmarks that we found in publicly available sources. But one of the things that we can take a look at is the RPT as the correlation between the RPT and the LGU performance. So we take into account the performance of the LGU and see if there is a correlation as to those LGUs that are actually updating regularly their RPT, the valuation. So we have yet to obtain data to be able to make that analysis, but we'll ask actually the help of DOF to be able to get that data, and then maybe we can look at that correlation.
Thank you for that, Crystal, for raising that. I just remembered there was a slide shown by BLGF before on RPT versus business tax. No, I think I don't know if you showed that earlier, but you showed this to me before. Do we have that slide now? Do we have? Is there a ratio that we're looking at? For example, is business tax? What ratio between business tax and RPT should we strive for? Should RPT be bigger or ito? No?
Mr. Chair, if you look at the slide, this gives you a performance of the real property tax and the business tax before and during the implementation of the local government code. So the story behind this performance is that real property tax before the LGC was implemented is the main revenue source of the LGUs. But when LGC was passed, the performance of the real property tax was surpassed by the business tax. They should be ideally moving together, especially if the economy is growing. That will be the ideal scenario. But looking at this picture, we look at it differently at the side of the BLGF. What we're seeing in here, it's because the reason why LBT or local business tax is improving in terms of collection, it's because it's a captured tax. Meaning, in every time that there's business renewal, every January, uh, the taxpayers will also have to pay their local business tax. And we also take note that local business tax base is on gross receipts or sales, not really on the net income. So again, Mr. Chairperson, there an ideal scenario? The ideal scenario is both collections should be moving upward, especially if the economy is improving.
Thank you. But is there any ratio that you're looking at? Let's say RPT should be because here it's 40% of local tax revenue. Is it should be 50%? Should be? Is there such a study? Wala naman.
None at this time, Mr.
All right.
Chairperson.
Sige. So the ultimate measure is the RPT per GDP.
Correct, Mr.
And the
Chairperson.
target, the target that we should be striving for is 1%. No, that's the OECD average. BIR is also here. Attorney De Los Santos, any comments on the measure? I understand that BIR will also use
Yes.
the output, no? So
Yes.
wala nang zonal valuation, no?
Same.
So tataas na yung babayaran ng mga brokers. Well, yung brokers naman kikita because commission based. But yung mga yung mga bibili, no?
Mr. Chair, the Bureau of Internal Revenue supports the passage of House Bill 6558 and Senate Bill 314 and all other Senate bills on real property valuation and Assessment Reform Act, as this will benefit the Bureau by eliminating wide disparities in real property valuation, harmonizing real property valuation among different government offices in order to avoid confusion by having single reference for real property values. This will also help in the increase in collection of the one-time transactions of the BIR po. And without adopting new tax measure and reducing costs in revising schedule of zonal values if centralized in one government office. So the BIR fully supports the passage of this bill.
Thank you. Let's show again slide 16. I think this is where BIR can benefit from this bill. Let's show slide 16 of the BLGF slide. Well, it goes without here. No, it goes without saying that the local governments will benefit 7,000% more. No, because that's the undervaluation. 7,000% less. No, so in terms of BIR, it will gain 94% more because the SMVs, the difference between the SMVs and the zonal valuation is almost 100%. No, so that's the difference between now. But sorry, the gain is 930%. Sorry, I'm looking at the wrong. The gain will be 930% in terms of value. So I think BIR will stand to gain in terms of their one-time collection by about 930%. Of course, the brokers will be happy also, no? Kasi yan ang basis nung kanilang presyo. But right now, I want to ask BIR, is there any information sharing between LGUs and BIR at your RDOs? Is there, for example, somebody sells and they ask for a tax clearance, di ba? Humingi sila ng car ang hiningi nila. Uh, there's a price there. And that price should be supposedly the market price. Is that being shared to the LGU so that the assessors will know how much the pricing in their locality? Is there such a thing as information sharing between BIR and the LGU?
None, Mr. Chair, but the local government is involved in the revision of zonal values with the
Yeah,
BIR.
I know it's involved, no, but are they being? I want to ask the local governments. Are you being heard? No. So yeah. Ayaw ng mga brokers niyan ng information sharing eh, no? Kasi iba yung binabayad nila sa local government, iba yung binabayad nila sa IBR. So the benefit of the brokers to have different because pag info sharing sila, the same price na, no? But I just want to put that on record if there are formal information sharing or data sharing. Alam ko wala eh. None, no? No, because that's
Yes, Mr.
also a
Chair.
feature of this bill, no? The database.
We wanted niya kasi because they already have an existing yung naka-database na si BIR. Sabi ko, instead of us inputting the data already there, they should already capture the data already existing with the BIR.
All right, thank you. So that's the bill will enhance that. Actually, there's no more information sharing. It will be a unified database that all 23, tama ba? 23 national government agencies. Can we flash that again? This is also quite important, no? The other agencies who conducts independent valuation, no? Slide 9. And so all of these government agencies, they have their own valuation methodology. No, I know that Land Bank is the valuator or the appraiser of DPWH. I thought that was disclosed last time. No, but they use a different. I'm sure they have a different methodology compared to the local government units, compared to the BIR. So the intention here is all of these 23 will now have one market value. Correct?
Mr. Chair, let's just clarify. Single valuation base for taxation purposes, but the other national government agencies and other stakeholders will be using this as a reference or benchmark for different purposes.
Okay.
Because they have different purposes, Mr.
All right,
Chairperson.
all right. So they can, are they mandated to use it as reference or optional lang for them? Because I think, again, no, we can use the law to mandate them. Because we're trying to avoid confusion, duplication, arbitrary valuations. I think the intention of having one internationally accredited valuation methodology is the right step. But all of these agencies, kasi iba-iba yung agencies, no? So all of these agencies should definitely be mandated to use this, no?
In the present form of our proposal, Mr. Chairperson, it's not mandated. It's used as a reference or benchmarking for other purposes.
For example, BOI. Let's take BOI as an example. If I'm someone, I will apply for incentives. No, obviously I will bloat my capital. Correct. I will give you a high. I will ask the appraiser, oh, appraise mo naman to na mataas. Then I'll give it to BOI, so I can show the BOI that I have a huge capital investment and get incentives, no? But if BOI will use our common valuation, then BOI can gauge the accurate amount of investment the applicant will do or will make. So isn't that the intention to have a singular international accredited appraisal methodology so that everyone's on the same boat. And this, because that the same applicant will probably pay the RPT, will probably pay BIR, will probably pay other government agencies. So magkakaroon siya ng dalawang libro ulit, no? May appraisal ako for BOI, meron akong schedule of market value for the RPT. So my point there is maybe this is a good opportunity, a good time to put it in the law that all of these agencies will be mandated to use one singular appraisal value or one singular market value.
That will be the ideal scenario, Your Honor.
No, can you?
I don't think it will be ideal. Kasi sir, if you value a particular property, it's like valuing it independently, sir. While this one, sir, we don't use that valuation process. We use mass appraisal guidelines. We value the whole LGU or street particularly, but not that particular property, which is different for valuation standards, which is current market value talaga po yun. Kasi the one of the considerations used in mass appraisal is the current market value, but if you will do the mass appraisal, that will not be the value indicated in the schedule of market value.
My point there is for, let's say BOI. No? BOI is a classic case because BOI, if I'm the applicant, I would like to bloat my investments. I would like to make my land 2 times, 3 times more so that in the eyes of the of BOI, the investment organization, it looks like I'm investing a lot, no? Pero in reality, my land is not as much, no?
Yun nga po yung individual appraisal lang po yun. Compared to what we are using, it's a mass appraisal. We cannot do that particular value here, the same here. Can we do the mass appraisal valuation?
Yeah, Yusek, go ahead. Yeah.
Yes, Mr. Chair. What we can do is to look at it as a reference, but then again, for to meet the purposes of the different agencies, they can use other factors. But at least it's one of the elements that they can consider in terms of achieving the goal of or their objectives.
I understand where Celine is coming from, no? Because, yeah, I'm just trying to use this opportunity since we're already reforming the entire RP valuation process. If there are opportunities to align all the different agencies, make it harmonious, so that our taxpayers will not be confused, our applicants will not be confused. I'm trying to find opportunities to harmonize the different government agencies. May I request DOF to look at that, no? If there are opportunities to make it simpler and more harmonized, no? I'll go to this group kasi kanina pa ho sila may side comments, no? So I'll go to Creba. I'll ask Creba their opinion, no? But it's good. I'm very happy that Creba is physically here. Ma'am, we invited, last time you weren't able to join us because of previous appointment, but it's important to hear Creba, no, being the biggest real estate association in the Philippines. Definitely this has direct impact, no, to your organization. So may we hear your comments on the bill?
Okay, good morning, Mr. Chair and everyone. We earlier already submitted to your good office list of our comments, but for the purpose of this hearing, we would just like to manifest our full support on the proposed bills to seek or introduce seeking to introduce reforms in property valuation and assessment, and we recognize the need to reform outdated valuations, no? On the scheduling of market values, the bill is a timely opportunity to overhaul the current system of SMV formulation, and we support the proposition that the DOF, BLGF be given full powers and authority to appoint technically competent local assessors to the various LGUs, who shall then prepare the SMVs for review and endorsement of the valuation board, regional valuation board, to be composed of 4 representatives from government and 3 from the private sector. On the buying, selling, and expropriation of real property, although land parcels are already classified based on their current actual use, our chamber is proposing a general purpose land classification, which is defined as land that is raw land, undeveloped, and underdeveloped, which has potential for development into residential, commercial, industrial, institutional, or other productive uses, and must not be less than 5,000 square meters. These lands classified as general purpose shall be valued lower than other classifications because currently raw land or some raw land is already classified as either residential, commercial, industrial, or any other use in the BIR zonal value schedule, which leads to raw lands being set higher than actual market price. And so the effect also on the RPT is higher, no? Because of the classification, even if it is actually raw land. On the local property taxation, yeah, the current uncontrolled practice of LGUs to impose sudden and as much as 500 to 5,000% taxes or tax increases to fund local initiatives is really confiscatory, no, to say the least, and heavily detrimental to homeowners. Among others, we recommend that the RPT must be capped naman to a more reasonable level of perhaps either 30% from the previous assessment or probably adjusted from when, you know, the last adjustment that they have made on their market prices, and then eventually based on current inflationary factors. So we will submit another position paper, Mr. Chair, based on today's hearings, but we ultimately believe that, of course, sustaining public faith in real estate transactions, which is a core value manifested by the valuation reform, is essential to the industry's continuing progress. And we hope that we can take, these proposals into consideration. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. We'll ask, we also asked, we invited Team Up, the another premier organization in our country, to give their comments.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. On behalf of Team Up, first of all, we'd like to manifest that Team Up submitted a position paper during the last Congress, but it will be submitting again another position paper for purposes of the current Congress. Now, I'd just like to center on certain of the points or questions that you raised earlier. Number one is in terms of the public consultation aspect, removing it from the Sanggunian and moving it to the Department of Finance or the Bureau of Local Government Finance. If we understand correctly, the position taken by the BLGF earlier, the Department of Finance doesn't have the power to revise the schedule of values given by the assessor. It may question, but it doesn't have the power to revise. Therefore, if it doesn't have the power to revise, then the public consultation should not be made at the BLGF level. Because there's no point having a public consultation where the BLGF doesn't have the power to make the revision. So in response to your question earlier, the public consultation should be made at the Sangguniang level to give the local assessor the local nuance, the local understanding of the requirements at the local level. So there's no conflict between making the public consultation at the Sangguniang level, because the Sangguniang may just provide a resolution or may just provide the avenue for the local assessor to be able to get the local nuance that it needs in order to make the proposed values to be submitted to the Bureau of Local Government Finance. So that's one of the items that we mentioned in our previous position paper. One other item that we'd like to point, one of your questions earlier, and we totally agree with the position of the committee in respect of the constitutionality of this bill. And we also agree with the Bureau of Local Government Finance that there are two aspects to the imposition of taxes, the technical aspect and the political aspect. And we totally also agree that the technical function is just one variable. So if this variable is insulated, then it's okay, it's insulated. The thing is that in terms of the political aspect, and again, going to the local nuance that you mentioned earlier, we totally agree with the position of CREBA that probably there are two things that needs to be done. First is there has to be an alignment between the technical and the political, meaning if there is going to be a revision of values every 2 years, then there has to be a review of the rates and assessment level at the same time, so that there can be that mechanism. Because if one lags behind the other, then you can have an increase in market values, but the same assessment levels and the same tax rates will be applied by the local government unit, thereby increasing the real property taxes. So there has to be an alignment between the two so that the calibrated response that was being discussed by the Bureau of Local Government Finance earlier can be implemented, can be properly implemented. And second is that the thing that we agree with CREBA is that to a certain degree, we'd like to propose a cap on the increase in real property taxes, so that the impact of the potential increase, even at a calibrated level, can be mitigated. What is the cap? We don't know, but at least it doesn't have to be a significant increase. And that is what, again, included in our position paper that was submitted in the last Congress. There are additional points, Mr. Chair, in terms of the submitted position paper, but we'd like to just include it in a position paper that we're going to submit to this body. In addition, Mr. Chair, I was also asked, because there's also other developers associations, I was asked by the Subdivision Housing and Development Association, SHEDA, to be allowed to also submit a position paper in this respect, because I'm also a member of SHEDA. And in my corporate capacity as part of SM Investments, we'd also like to be given the opportunity to submit a position paper, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, we would welcome your position papers. Those are many hats you wear, no? From one developer, from a association, from DMAP. No, so different
Kalad ka rin,
perspectives.
sir.
No, but different perspectives, and we welcome that. No, that's why we invited as many different organizations as possible, so we'll see all the different perspectives. No, because we might be creating unintentional consequences. No, so yeah, we welcome your position paper to that effect.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. We also invited AER.
Yes.
Good
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. Thank you for affording us this opportunity to speak on the issue. So we did submit our position paper earlier this morning to your office. Action for Economic Reform strongly supports the immediate passage of the Real Property Valuation and Assessment Reform, or RPVAR. The RPVAR, just to summarize our rationale for supporting it, will build better rules and systems for the collection of real property taxes in the country through the adoption of internationally accepted standards on property valuation, the rationalization of the process of property valuation and assessment, the establishment of a comprehensive database to support the valuation requirements, and the strengthening of data sharing between local government units and national government agencies. Furthermore, an important aspect of this reform is that it will depoliticize the valuation process by centralizing the technical aspect of the valuation of real properties and the updating of SMVs using rationally determined benchmarks. Meanwhile, the LGU legislative bodies will continue to retain their mandate to set tax rates and assessment values. So, for the purposes of the hearing, we'd like to also share some of the amendments that this body might consider in order to enhance the outcomes of these reforms. We have three proposals. The current proposals greatly improve the status quo by providing the necessary incentives for updating the SMVs. This is found in Section 18 of the House Bill. For example, LGUs that fail to conduct a general revision of assessment and property classification and to use the approved SMVs will be ineligible for performance-based grants or any form of credit financing. This is in Section 17 of the House Bill. The measure also provides greater incentives through sanctions of those government officials involved in Sections 28 to 33 of the House Bill. So moving on to our proposals, we think these existing provisions are positive, but we believe that it is most appropriate or ideal to completely insulate the technical function of the updating of the SMVs from any political incentives, such as those faced by government officials. Thus, what we recommend is that the BLGF wholly take on this role. This will prevent any potential delays on the side of the LGU to comply with revaluation. The LGU will maintain its authority to set tax rates and assessment values. So, going on to this, I think it was discussed earlier that the process would be that the LGU would do consultations, would submit its assessment to the DOF, and if the DOF finds that it does not comply with practices, it would send back the valuation to the LGU and the LGU could start from scratch. So our fear is just that although the LGU can technically comply with the process, it might result in them still not updating the valuation over time. And what we found is if we don't address that loophole in the law, that could result in the outcome that we intended to not being achieved. So that's our first recommendation. Furthermore, while the Local Government Code of 1991 provides for varying assessment levels on residential properties based on the fair market value, we believe that the variance and disparity in the value between and among residential properties has only grown over the past 30 years. So one egregious case in point is where the assessment level for socialized housing can be the same as that of an exclusive residential area in Metro Manila, such as Forbes Park, for example. Thus, we recommend the inclusion of a provision to further classify residential properties differentially. For example, luxury residential versus low-cost and socialized versus mixed-use, etc. And the third and final recommendation we believe that we must take into account the inefficient use of land in high-density areas, especially residential areas. It is in these areas where the inappropriate utilization of the scarce resource of land may not only lead to inefficient outcomes, but may also exacerbate economic and social inequities. One example would be, for example, golf courses within Metro Manila. Taxation plays a key role in improving equity. Thus, we believe the reform can and should provide for the ability of the BLGF or the LGU to classify and assess these properties in these areas on a more granular level. So to close, we are glad that President Bongbong Marcos has supported the passage of these tax reforms during his administration and he's identified these issues as priority legislative measures. It was tax reform measures secured in previous administrations that have improved the country's macroeconomic fundamentals and enhanced our reputation and strength of institutions. We do hope that the administration will likewise follow or seriously reconsider the other recommendations in the fiscal consolidation program which the previous Department of Finance has crafted. With respect to the real property valuation bill, securing this reform will be a win-win for both the national government and local governments. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Ang gusto natin, win-win. Win-win solution. All right. Thank you for that comment. I have a few more questions. I have actually a lot, but the other ones these are all details we can tackle during the technical working group. So we'll just talk about broad strokes today. And the Attorney Meneses raised a lot of good points that I wanna follow up. Yung period of consultation, revision, there are time periods here, in the bill. One of the most important is for the Sanggunian to approve, no? I think it's 10 days. Yung sa Sanggunian. 60 days ba? Here, there's another one. The local chief executive shall act within 10 days to submit. There's 60 days for the Sanggunian to approve, and there's 10 days.
With regards to the Sanggunian.
Here, 60 days Sanggunian, and there's also 10 days and 15 days for the enactment by the mayor. Correct? After the enactment of the Sanggunian. No. So there are two levels here, no? The Sanggunian first and then the mayor. Diba? What if the Sanggunian will not act within the time frame?
The local assessor will automatically conduct the general revision, sir.
No, they will submit. May submission na eh, diba?
Yes,
They
sir.
will
We will, upon receipt from the secretary, sir, we have 15 days to, or sana 30 days, to endorse to the local Sanggunian the approved schedule of market value. And the Sanggunian has 60 days to approve the assessment level and tax rate. And then the mayor has 10 to 15 days to approve the ordinance enacted. In case the Sanggunian did not act within 60 days, sir, the assessor will automatically conduct general revision using the market value approved by the secretary and using the old assessment level and tax rate.
break it down first, no? Because that's critical. So the local chief executive will transmit, diba,
Yes,
within
sir.
15 days to
With
the
30.
Sanggunian.
Sanggunian.
Okay. And then the Sanggunian has 60 days to
Enact the
To
law
enact.
for the tax rate.
and then after the enactment, they have 10 days to implement.
The mayor
The mayor has 10 days to
to
implement.
approve or disapprove. Sorry din.
No, here kasi shall act within 10 days in case.
Yes, sir, yun yung approval niya or
Okay.
ano niya.
So they can approve or disapprove, no? They can veto, in other
Yes.
words. No, they can
That's
veto.
the 10 days, sir.
Okay. So let me just break down first the roles, no? For the Sanggunian, what if they don't act within 60 days?
So that's it. We will conduct the general revision.
No, you can conduct the general revision anytime you want, or within the prescribed period. But ultimately, the Sanggunian will approve it, eh. Diba?
So if they don't act
Even
on-
though you conduct the revision, it will not be binding without the approval of the Sanggunian.
Sir, no. Kasi we are automatically, meron yung date na ano eh, approved.
So yung valuation automatic.
Sir, kasi the evaluation is automatically approved upon publication by the Department of Finance, sir. Eh. And
Okay.
that's for all levels, sir. BIR.
Yeah, but that's correct. If the DOF secretary approves it, diba? It has to be submitted to sa Sanggunian.
For the assessment level and tax rate lang, sir.
And also for the ordinance itself.
Yes, sir. In the absence of that, sir, the old rates and the old assessment level will be applied if they did not act on the 60
Yeah, but
days.
what is the schedule of market values?
Sir, the approved by the the Secretary of Finance.
Because I showed earlier, no, in the nasaan ba yun? Yung ordinance. Because the Sanggunian also approves the ordinance, di ba?
Sir, only the tax rate and the assessment level.
Yes, the tax rate and the assessment level. But in the present system ngayon,
Including the schedule of market value.
including the schedule of market values, di ba? So we will remove that, correct? But it will still be submitted to the Sanggunian, correct?
Because that will be reference to determine what the tax impact study, sir. And which one of the tax impact study they will approve.
So, but when they come up with an ordinance, the schedule of market value is there?
No longer, sir.
No longer.
Only the assessment level and the tax rate will be incorporated in the ordinance, sir.
Here, ito yung, I'm just showing on the board the ordinance. And the ordinance contains the schedule of market values here. No? So, mawawala na yan. That will be out already. So,
Yes,
the
sir.
Sanggunian will only approve
Tax rate and assessment
the
level.
tax rates and the assessment level.
Yes,
If
sir.
they don't act,
The old tax rate, the existing tax rate and assessment level will be applied
the existing tax rate on the new,
for the new schedule market
di
value.
tataas lahat ng presyo.
Yes,
So they have to act.
they have to act on it, sir.
Or else matatalo sila
Yes,
sa
sir.
eleksyon. Diba? I
For
mean,
the first time, halos 1,000% increase, more or less.
Oh, 7,000% increase.
Yes.
Yun in ano eh. Oh, 7,000. So in other words, they have no choice but to act.
Should, sir, they should.
Oh, they have to lower down the tax rates. Okay. So they want to make that clear also. I think by political force, they have to act. Eh. They have to act. Because or else it's their political future will be affected, no? Unless they want to lose. No? So, yeah. So, I just
Siguro
want to...
sasama na lang sa clarification because it's not also clear, nasa note ko rin yun eh.
Yeah, yeah.
The effectivity for the LGU is not clear din talaga. Pero by ano kasi, by ano, the 60 days counts.
Okay.
Pero we should be...
No, but I want to make it clear that the Sanggunians, wala kasi tayong representative ng Sanggunians, will no longer enact an ordinance approving the schedule of market values. No? Kasi right now, it's a process. It's one process eh. It's one process. Okay. And then they will only approve the levels and the tax rates. No? So they have to be quick. Kasi if they don't act, when will it be? When will it be?
That's the question yan. Kasi within 60, I don't know, that's what we need to clarify. The 60-day period ba? Or the 60-day inaction? Yun yung hindi, wala po sa batas.
And you have to check legally. Maybe si Attorney Meneses can weigh in on this. The Sanggunian approves the level of tax rates and the level of assessment level based on the old market value. Diba? Based on the old
If they
assessment
don't
value.
enact no ordinance.
No,
sir.
but at present ngayon.
Yes, sir.
But now you are removing this old schedule of market value and imposing the new. But my ordinance is based on the old.
Yes, sir.
So how can the assessor implement
Sir,
the new one if the ordinance is based on the old schedule
sir,
of market
yung sa
value?
Valenzuela kasi, sinama natin yung schedule at saka yung tax rate, sir. Pero there's a real property tax code dapat
Yes.
separately po yun. Doon po dapat nakalagay yung assessment level at saka yung tax rate. Sa Valenzuela kasi, since we don't want to, we automatically amended that inclusive sa schedule natin.
But there are two ordinances.
There should be, sir. There
The
should
market
be.
value and the
schedule
assessed
and the
value.
tax rate, yes,
Correct?
sir.
There are two ordinances yan parate. In
Yes,
fact,
sir.
in Valenzuela, the market value is the assessed level is 1993 pa yata eh.
Yes, sir.
1993 pa. Ang ginagalaw lang natin parati in schedule of market value.
Yes,
No?
sir.
But isn't the assessed level based on the
Sir, no.
market value
Sir,
or
no.
independent siya?
So independent siya kasi we could independently change the tax rate din eh. Kaya nga separate ordinance po siya. And we could independently change the schedule of market value.
Okay. All right. Sige. Let me just make
If
that
they don't,
clear.
amend, yung luma pa rin will apply. The
Okay.
existing. It is the existing kasi, sir eh. Hindi siya amended. It is the existing assessment level and tax rate.
Yeah. Which is high, no?
Which
40%.
is high if we implement the new schedule of market value.
Okay. So they have to implement
They
a
have
new-
to amend the
amend.
ordinance.
Okay. And then what if the well, ito naman yung 10 days local chief executive and 15 days. I think if the mayor will veto it.
The existing rate and sir, the existing rate and the existing tax assessment level will
So
apply.
yung mataas ang papasok. So wala siyang choice but to also approve the lower.
Approve.
Okay. Yeah. Attorney?
Mr. Chair, just to make a clarification, the approval is on the assessment level and rates or on the schedule of fair market values?
The schedule of market value is approved by the secretary.
So there's no veto power on the part of the
No.
mayor?
No.
Okay.
That's why I want to clarify it because in the present system, there is an ordinance for the schedule of market values. Now, my initial thinking is that will be submitted to Sanggunian and then Sanggunian will come up with a new ordinance based on the approved schedule of market value. Wala na palang ganun. Okay, all right.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, one last point.
Yeah.
That's the reason why, yun nga yung point namin, it has to be simultaneous yung dalawa. But sabi nyo nga, political naman na effect. The Sangguniang and the mayor will be forced really. But malay nyo, may LGU na gustong 50 billion ang kanyang real property tax collections.
Ang fear ko lang, not all Sanggunians are responsive. Eh. No? Some of them are quite, it takes time for them to understand. Alam ni Celine yan, no? Not all assessors are also very responsive. No? So the information campaign is important here, or else they might wake up and 7,000% increase yung kanilang, that's dangerous. No? That's dangerous. Yun ang misinformation or accusation that will happen. No? So that's why it's important to put this on record so that they can read the transcript and understand the potential implications of this bill. All right. And then there's also another issue here, no, yung sudden changes in the market values in 18, section 18, in an event of calamities, where's that? Ayan. Yeah. In terms of calamities, disasters, man-made or natural, and other adverse circumstances. The other adverse circumstances can be anything to, di ba? It can be another Marawi siege. It can be a Yolanda type of ano. But the thing here, if you look at the succeeding sentences, there's a process. There's a process eh. So meron kang recommendation from the BLGF regional office, and then it will be approved by the DOF secretary. So meron siyang process. My point here is, in case of calamities, dapat mabilis eh. No, in case of disaster, dapat mabilis. How come there's a process pa? And the process here actually is the process in revising. No? It's the same process. So, in knowing government, by the time the local government can respond, it will probably take months, no? So my point here is, if the intention here is to be responsive, I think the intention here is to be responsive. The process is not responsive. Eh. Now, can we improve on this? Maybe we can. I don't know. We can empower the local government or the assessor to come up with a temporary recommendation or something to that effect, no?
Yes, Mr. Chairperson, we're taking note of second paragraph, section 18, to improve on the language to make this more responsive, the situation. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. Actually, I have other questions, but these are more about some of the provisions in the bill, but very very detailed na. We can do this during the technical working group. I think conceptually we have captured the essence of the bill. Unless other people will have other, baka may question ho kayo sa CREBA? Do you have do you have any questions from their stakeholders? If you wanna raise anything from BIR, wala naman. All right, so I don't have any more questions on the concept. What we'll do is we'll move to a technical working group. Before we end, maybe you want to demonstrate, Celine, you ran some simulations rin, no?
Kuha yung kanila na, sir. Hindi kasi, sir.
Yeah, but yours is, well, sa kanila actual, no?
Hindi, sir. Doon
Para makita naman ng mga taga Valenzuela, hindi tataas.
If I'm checking Makati, kasi kanina nakita ko yung 1 million versus 40,000. I'm trying to no impact siya. Bumababa yung SCF nila kasi tsaka yung general fund. Kasi binababa mo yung rate, binababa mo yung assessment level para maging zero yung impact sa taxpayer. That is considered. But when I'm checking it, bumababa tuloy yung share niya ng general fund and SEF niya. So that should be considered by the LGU talaga before the... So sa first lang naman mangyayari to eh. If consistent na hindi na ganito kalaki. Because this is the first, the impact really is expected sobra. I doubt na magkakaroon ng zero, ano, zero change or ano, sir. Kasi when we try to move it, bumababa yung impact sa SEF and ano eh, general fund.
The SAF is you cannot lower it down to 1%.
1% po yung nasa local government
So
code.
you have to calculate in a way that the tax due is the same.
Yes, when we
Consider 1%.
adjust the
And
tax rate.
you have to remember the SEF you cannot lower down, huh? And it's based per
But if we lower the assessment level, that might affect the SEF, sir. Because that's the basis of the
yes.
SEF.
Yeah. So you have to find the sweet spot.
Yes, sir.
Kasi-
Pero with this looking at Makati, sir, I doubt we can do the break-even na halos no impact at all. That will not affect those taxes or funds.
Do you wanna present your
So,
ano?
okay lang.
Kasi they ran.
Yes.
Para yung mga taga Valenzuela naman, di magalit sa akin.
Nandito ako. Sir, nasa...
Do you have a...
I gave it to Attorney Alta.
Slide.
I gave it to Attorney kanina, kay Attorney Alta.
You can just zoom on the blue part, Carla. In blue part lang. I don't know if you can see. Medyo hindi yata.
First blue part kasi that's without the change in the tax rate and assessment level. It will be a 900% increase.
Right.
Considering kasi na 6,000 existing market value namin, sir. Sorry. The existing unit value, sir, in Valenzuela for commercial in MacArthur, sir, is 6,000. And if we will have a resulting unit value of 60,000, sir, na magiging market value niya to date, if there is no change in the assessment level and the tax rate, the increase will be, in the tax due will be 900%, sir. So I tried to...
Wala, talo na ako dyan. So
Talo na tayo.
yeah, for sure.
So I tried to adjust to reduce the assessment level to 5% and then reduce and maintain the tax rate of 1.5 na basic tax rate natin, sir. It is break even, walang increase. Sir, yun ang ano natin. So I have to lower it from 50 to 5%. Sir, this is a good example lang na pwedeng magano, pero kanina nga, when I'm checking Makati, hindi kaya talaga.
Yeah.
So I tried also na may 1% increase, at least para for the LGU naman po. I reduced the assessment level to 5.01, 5.01, and the tax rate increased to 1.52. May 1% increase lang siya.
Yeah, what we want to put on record that it's possible that break even.
It's possible kasi we just revised, sir. We
Oh.
just revised. That's good for us. Pero if we do that to residential, sir, I doubt magagawa natin yan.
Yeah, yeah.
Sa BIR naman, ang magiging impact sa kanila 130.77% increase.
All right. Okay.
Sir-
No, I just want to capture na it's possible na
It's
zero.
possible, sir.
But the challenge there is those LGUs
Don't
who have not
revise.
revised for a long time.
Yes, sir.
That's a challenge. And just submit to us na lang EDPAM extreme cases. Like, kasi Valenzuela is updated, so the increase is not so much. Those LGUs, I've seen in your presentation some LGUs who have not revised since the 90s, I think, no? So let's just run some simulation up to how low can they go in terms of assessment level to reach break even, to reach a zero increase in their tax due.
The LGU should have considered the general fund and the barangay share and municipal share.
Yeah, definitely. All right. So,
We will do that, Mr. Chairperson.
thank you. So just for submission to BLGF, number of LGUs who have updated their schedule of market value as aligned with actual market values. The BSP study on impact on inflation, the number of automated LGUs, a DICT position paper, sir, and then NEDA for study and submission correlation of RPT to LGU development and for performance. And feel free to submit to us your position paper on the matter. All right, so
Chair, may I be recognized?
yes, go ahead. Yes, PVTech.
Have-
As promised, we invited you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have this concern that we wanted the BLGF to be addressed in the TWG meeting. Regarding the repealing clause that you are seeking and proposing to repeal our section 4H and section 9 of PD 539. 538, and I hope you will address that because it is a very vital in our very mandate. Specifically that it is one of our biggest sources of revenue. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Do you, if you want to answer that? No, this is a very, very nuanced or very particular amendment. No, I have no idea why FIBIDEC is included in the proposal. No.
Mr. Chair, in the proposed bill, it is correct that PVDEC was included in the repeal list, taking into account that they are a special body collecting real property tax, which is not an LGU. That's the reason. But in case during the discussion in the TWG, we can further discuss this and we are open for discussion, maybe not in the repeal, but more on the amendment part.
They collect, if I understand it correctly, they collect real property and that forms part of their income. But do they also practice the same valuation process or taxation process with the LGU? Do they have, let's say, assess value, assess? I'm not very familiar, no?
Good afternoon, Your Honor. PBDEC managed a 3,000 hectares portion of two municipalities of Misamis Oriental. Since the passage of the local government code, PBDEC religiously conducted general revision of real property every 3 years, Your Honor. We make our scale of fair market value and approved by our board of directors. That's it, Your
Do
Honor.
you have a tax rate, corresponding tax rate?
We follow the tax rate of Title 2, Book 2 of the local government code, Your Honor.
Okay. So I guess the same methodology can be applied to FIVIDEC, no? Is that, I think that's a common sense way forward, no? Is that possible?
Yes, Mr. Chair. The idea on why it was included here is because we want to be consistent with the local government code where the power to collect RPTs with the local governments. Because in this case, PVDEC is affecting the LGU because now the power to collect RPTs with PVDEC. So it's something that we can discuss further because the other pathway is to change the nature and how PVDEC operates consistent with other economic zones in the country or to maintain the status quo and leave the status quo where the RPT is a source of PBDEC's fund.
My locator in FIBIDEC, who do I pay my RPT to? FIBIDEC or to LGU?
Sir, for the information by everybody, for the basic tax, PBDEC retains 75% of the basic tax. 25% is limited to the LGU. Then the special education fund, Your Honor, 50% goes to the Misamis Oriental and the 50% goes to the LGU.
Are you the only one? Are you the only ecozone doing that? Parang I haven't come across this type of
Yes, Your Honor.
of power, no?
Tinanggal na sa trade yung iba.
Okay.
Retail lang sila kasi may congressman na naman.
Oo nga. Yeah. Sige. I think conceptually, what we will apply to the LGU should be applied to FIBIDEC, no? We're not going to touch on the charter of FIBIDEC because it's not within our ambit, no? But I think from a taxation point of view, what will be applied to the LGU should be applied to FIBIDEC in terms of the market schedule of market value.
Yes, Your Honor.
On your distribution or your tax rate, bahala na kayo doon, no?
Mr. Chair, actually, on our specific power to levy, assess, and collect taxes, it is in accordance to the promulgated rules provided by the Secretary of Finance.
We'll just take note of that, Yusek, Shello, no? So that during the technical working group we can tweak it. But conceptually, what we're only touching insofar as FIBIDEC is concerned is the schedule of market value, no? Because that's the intention, to harmonize everything.
We have nothing against it, Mr. Chair. Our only concern is our power to collect, assess, and levy taxes, which will be stricken off if it will be amended.
Okay, all right. We'll take note of that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. So, hearing no more comments and suggestions, thank you very much for your time. We'll move into the technical working group next week so that we can move forward. So, maraming salamat po for your time. This meeting is hereby adjourned.